Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Library Tour of Doom. This is a protracted, freakishly itemized library tour that Lord Ganesha and I are doing, inflicting upon you, where we go through every one of my books. Every book that's on the shelf here, and that's a lot. That's a lot of books. It's the smallest amount of books on the shelf that I've ever had when I wasn't traveling, but it's still a large amount of books. Still going to take a long time. And we're not stopping there. We're also going to do ebooks and books from my inventories from days past that I don't have anymore. So who knows how long it will take? Lord Ganesha probably knows, but he's not talking now or ever. But anyway, our book today is a Loeb Classical Library edition of Livy. This is History of Rome, books 23 to 25 of the great Roman historian Livy, who worked on his history of Rome from Romulus and Remus, from the very foundings, from the foundings of the city, all the way to his present day. He worked on it for his entire life. He did nothing else. He would get a chunk of this done, usually in 2 or 3 books. It would be a recognized thematic chunk, hence the grouping right here. I don't particularly agree with it when it comes to something like a volume in 2021 where nobody knows about the typical pentads or groupings of Livy, because this way you're getting 2 books for the price of a Loeb Classical Library edition. But one way or another, he would finish a slightly thematically unified whole like that, and then he would publish it and do readings everywhere and have discussions and give recitals, and then go right back to work. Didn't change. He just worked on it for his whole life, and it has met with a kind of a pitiless fate since the German academics of the 19th century took over, for the good. I mean, grounding history on what you can prove, grounding history on documentation, and then sober analysis of the documentary record is the way to do history, absolutely. But it left people like Livy, who freely conflate events, freely invent dialogue, out in the wilderness, where suddenly readers had no idea what to do with Livy, or someone like Suetonius, or something like that. These beloved writers who were embraced by the Italian Renaissance, they were translated and retranslated, they were loved, and justifiably so. There is no more enjoyable reading experience than Livy. Even in this is a translation by J.C. Yardley, and like all Loeb Classical Library editions, it has the Latin, the original language on one side, the red covers is Latin, the green are Greek, and the English on the other side. And Loeb's have an unfortunate reputation of being sort of uninviting English translations, mainly wooden trots. Mainly the key here is that this gives the student a nice, accessible, scholarly vetted Latin version, and that's all anybody's going to really use these volumes for. So the English language translation is, with Loeb's, has a kind of a bad reputation that is, I'm sorry to say, quite often deserved. but one way or another, once formal academic history took over, people didn't know what to do with Livy, because he lived and worked in Rome. He consulted all of the archives and primary documents, but it's pretty clear in points that we have a pitiful remnant of his complete work, what I wouldn't give for the complete works of Livy in a nice spiffy edition. But it's pretty obvious, reading what we have of him, that even sometimes when he had access to direct documentary evidence, when he could just, walk down the hill to an archive, sometimes he doesn't do it. And in light of the way we now think of history, what are you going to do with an author like that? And that led to a significant backlash, where people said, Livy's not reliable. He's telling stories. He's telling mythology. His history is very much nationalistic. It's very much patriotic. But I have always maintained that he is at least as accurate as most other ancient historians, and 10 times better to read. He's a friend. He's a friend on the page. And the thing I always worried about with Loeb Classical Library editions is not that I will miss that, because I can just put a paper over the English and read Livy directly without translator interference of any kind. But no, the thing that worries me is that I love translations. I love thinking about English language translations. I love examining them and figuring out, in addition to all the things, all the interesting things that the translator does, good or bad, I love figuring out whether or not the translation will hook someone who can't read the original. I am that someone in many, many cases of the things that I read in many other languages. I am reading a translation. We've discussed it on this channel many times. I'll be reading a translation and wondering how much of this is the translator and how much of this is the author. And when I read translations like this one of works where that isn't the case, works where I can just discard the translation, I worry about it even more. I worry about it even more. I worry about someone picking up this volume. Will they get why 2,000 years of readers have liked this author? Will they understand it? And I guess maybe they will. I'm kind of waiting for someone to do. It'll never happen because there's no economic incentive. But I'm kind of waiting for someone to do a real rollicking translation of Livy, a translation of Livy that does him complete justice, both in terms of accuracy of translation and especially in terms of accuracy of the feel. I don't think anyone's quite done that. A couple of translators for Penguin Classics 70 years ago came close in a couple of books, but the whole work, all in one volume, where it would easily fit. I wait for that. I don't know that that's ever happened. Yardley still does a good job. I want to read you an example of this. This is the city of Nola, which has checked. We're in the middle of the Second Punic War here, Rome versus Carthage, more specifically Rome versus Hannibal, and the city of Nola has checked what had seemed like an unbroken, unstoppable string of victories on the Carthaginian part, on Italian soil. And it's an odd thing, as Hannibal himself in Livy's version is quick to point out to his men, because this is not a consular army that is invested in Nola. These are not full consuls. This is a lower magistrate with far fewer men, and yet seem to be having victory. And during a check here, there's a dramatic moment where the Roman commander Marcellus marches his men out, Riders of Rohan style, and there's a pitched battle that is only interrupted by torrential rain, howling winds, and blinding thunder and lightning. So the forces have to withdraw. They have to stop what was a pitched at each other's throats battle and withdraw because the weather is just impossible. And while they're withdrawn, the two commanders try to buck up their forces. And Marcellus says, all the predictable things that you would think. I don't think Livy gives him a speech. I think instead we just get a paraphrase. Marcellus ordered the Romans to exert pressure on men defeated 2 days earlier and chased from Cumae a few days before that, men driven from Nola the previous year by him and other troops. Not all were on the battlefield, he told them. Some were roaming in the fields in raiding parties, and those fighting were weak from Campanian excesses and exhausted from drinking, whoring, and all manner of depravity throughout the winter. Gone was their renowned strength and vitality, and lost was that strength of body and mind with which the heights of the Pyrenees and Alps were scaled. We get that sort of thing, but it's reported rather than dramatized. But for Hannibal, Livy gives us a speech in quotes. Where he's not happy. He's not happy with his men at all. He says, "Are you, for all your efforts, barely able to face up to a Roman legate and fight a single legion and cavalry squadron? You, men that 2 consular armies never withstood? Is Marcellus, with recruits and Nolan reservists, getting away scot-free with attacking us yet again? Where is that soldier of mine who dragged the consul Gaius Flaminius from his mount and walked off with his head? Where is the one who killed Lucius Paulus at Cannae? Is your sword now blunt? Are your sword hands grown weak? Or is this some other strange phenomenon? Just a handful. You routinely defeated many. Now, with greater numbers, you can hardly resist a handful. You used to boast that you would take Rome if someone led you. Brave in your talk. Look, this is something smaller, and here I want to test your strength and courage. Take Nola, a city on the plains, not protected by river, not by sea, and from here I shall take you, or follow you, wherever you want, loaded with plunder and spoils from such an opulent town. So Hannibal has lost his patience. He's telling these men, where are the men that I led to such incredible victories? This isn't a heavily garrisoned town. It doesn't have geographical advantages. It's not consuls from Rome at the head of their legions. This shouldn't be a problem. Why is this such a problem? You notice he backs off at the end. Says, this is just a test. This is a primer for conquering Rome, and I will lead you or follow you. And then mentions booty, mentions treasure, all those sorts of things that commanders do when they're not 100% sure of their troops. And Hannibal wouldn't have been, since he was commanding a ragtag coalition of people, not all of whom could even speak to each other without translators. So you get moments like that scattered throughout here. It's always a pleasure to read Livy. I admit that with low classical libraries, I'm very happy when I get them from Harvard University Press, but I admit that they are a bit of a distracted reading experience for me, because I've got the one language on one side and the one on the other. And it's two different things I'm doing. One, on the one side, I'm luxuriating in the company of the author. On the other side, I'm thinking about what translations do and don't do. And if I'm reading just a Latin text, then I don't have to think about that. And if I'm reading just a translation, then I don't have to think about that. I'm thinking about one or the other. But still, wonderful to have, and a neat thing, as always, to check. If God forbid some new translation of Livy were to come out, you go straight to the Loeb to see what the author is doing, what the translator is doing with the work. But anyway, that's your library tour of Doom today. It's one of my favorite authors, so traveled all over the world with me. And we will be back next time, and we'll see. We're ranging all over the map, genre-wise, so we'll see what we encounter next time. Thank you, BookTube.